A demigod screams into a sky of alien dust. Around him, the dead and dying form a carpet of broken armor and shattered bone, a testament to a fury that defies the limits of flesh. He does not see the victory, he does not feel the triumph. He feels only the grinding of chrome teeth inside his skull, the binary shriek of a machine that has replaced his soul. This is not a warrior at the apex of his glory. This is a slave at the end of his chain, a king whose only crown is a circlet of agony. He is the last gladiator, the eater of cities, the unbroken child of a world built on cruelty. He is the Red Angel. He is Angron. Among the scattered sons of the Emperor, there are tales of glory and tales of hubris. There are stories of loyalty that held against the storm and of pride that shattered a nascent empire. But only one of the Primarchs was broken before he was ever whole. Only one was damned, not by a choice made in the heights of power, but by a wound inflicted in the depths of a pit. While his brothers were raised as princes, generals, and saviors, he was raised as an animal, a weapon, a thing to be bled for the entertainment of masters. Every other Primarch who turned against their father did so as an act of rebellion. For Angron, rebellion was not an act. It was the very state of his existence. His tragedy is not that he fell to chaos, for the ruinous powers found in him a vessel already hollowed out by pain. His tragedy is that he was never given a chance to stand. The story of the 12th Primarch is not one of descent. It is a chronicle of a pain so absolute, so foundational, that it would one day be given a name, a legion, and a dark, terrible god to worship. It was an age of impossible things, an age of reunion and rediscovery, when humanity, scattered and broken by the long night of old Earth's collapse, was being drawn back into a single great fold. This was the promise of the Great Crusade, a vision of unity and enlightenment carried on wings of fire and steel. At its head was the Emperor of mankind, a being of unimaginable power and vision, who had forged an army to reclaim the galaxy in the name of reason and order. The spearhead of this army, the instruments of his grand design, were the Legiones Astartes, the Space Marines. And at their head, there were meant to be 20 demigods, his own sons, crafted from his genetic code to be paragons of humanity, each a master of war, statecraft, and philosophy. They were the Primarchs, but this grand design had been shattered before it could be realized. The infant Primarchs, still in their gestation capsules deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, were stolen away by a vortex of Empyrean energy and scattered across the galaxy. The Emperor's dream was deferred, but not abandoned. And so the Great Crusade became not just a war of reunification, but a search, a galaxy-spanning quest for lost sons, each discovery a moment of triumph that echoed from Terra to the farthest frontiers of explored space. One by one they were found. Lion L. Johnson, the knight of the dark forests of Caliban, Fulgrim, the artisan prince of the dying world of Chemos, Perturabo, the master of siegecraft from the bitter fortress world of Olympia. Each reunion was a renewal of the Crusade's promise. Each found son brought his own unique genius, his own culture, his own legion, into the burgeoning Imperium. They were the living proof of the Emperor's vision. Humanity perfected, diverse yet united, striding towards a destiny of galactic dominion. The records of this era speak of hope as a tangible force, an energy that propelled fleets across unthinkable voids. For every world brought into compliance, for every forgotten human colony restored to the light of Terra, the dream grew stronger. The discovery of a Primarch was the ultimate validation of this dream. It was a holy day, a celebration that saw entire star systems rejoice. The Emperor would arrive, a golden figure of paternal majesty, to embrace a son lost for decades or even centuries. He would bestow upon him command of his legion, warriors forged from his own genetic template, who had waited in hope for the return of their sire. It was a myth made real, repeated across the stars, a father finding his children and through them securing the future of all mankind. It was in this era of boundless optimism, of myths being written in the plasma fire of conquest, that the ships of the Emperor's fleet broke the pale, thin sky of a world whose name would become a synonym for cruelty and failure. A civilized world of advanced technology and baroque social order, a world of tiered cities that scraped the clouds and vast, chemically blighted plains, a world named Nuceria. And on this world, the Emperor would find his 12th son. But there would be no joyous reunion. There would be no celebration. There would be only the cold, hard logic of empire and a choice that would sow the seeds of damnation for millennia to come. Nuceria was a world of masters and slaves. Its technologically advanced civilization was built upon a foundation of absolute brutality, a system of chattel slavery that fueled its industries and provided its cruel entertainment. The ruling elite, the so-called high riders of the tiered cities like Desh'ea, lived lives of decadent comfort, their every need met by a vast underclass of human property. Below the gleaming spires and manicured gardens, the world was a network of quarries, manufactories, and gladiatorial arenas, all operated by the brutalized and the unfree. It was a stable, orderly tyranny, a society that had perfected the art of breaking the human spirit for profit and pleasure. It was into this world that the gestation pod of the 12th Primarch fell. The few surviving records, fragmented and contradictory, suggest he was discovered on a desolate mountain slope, already surrounded by the bodies of strange Xenos aggressors who had attempted to claim him. But his first true memory would not be of a mountain, but of a pit. He was found not by a benevolent scholar or a proud warrior tribe, but by a slaver. And he was taken. He was too strong, too resilient, too defiant to be broken into a common laborer. Even as a child, his preternatural strength and impossible will marked him out. And on Nuceria, there was a special place for such beings, the arena. He was thrown into the gladiatorial pits, a place where slaves were forced to kill one another for the amusement of the high riders. He was given a name, Angron, a name that in the local dialect meant something akin to child of the mountain. But he would soon earn another title. He was a prodigy of violence, a master of any weapon placed in his hands, and a terrifying force even with his bare fists. He fought not with skill alone, but with a burning, incandescent rage that stunned all who witnessed it. He killed and killed, surviving bout after bout, his legend growing among the slave populace and his value increasing in the eyes of his masters. But his masters were not content with his natural fury. They sought to refine it, to amplify it, to make it a reliable tool, and so they subjected him to the cruelest of Nuceria's technological horrors. The butcher's nails. These were arcane archaeotech devices, neural implants that were hammered directly into the skull and cortex. They were not instruments of control in the conventional sense. They did not compel obedience. Their function was far more insidious. The nails were psych engine tormentors. They burrowed into the brain, severing the centers for calm, for pleasure, for peace, and massively amplifying the subject's aggression and rage. To be without anger, to be at rest, was to experience a growing, agonizing pressure within the skull, a pain that could only be relieved by the hormonal rush of combat and the act of killing. The nails did not just encourage violence, they made it a biological necessity. They turned rage into a form of addiction and peace into a form of withdrawal. They were a sentence of living death, a guarantee of a life spent in constant simmering agony, punctuated by moments of frenzied, bloody release. For a normal human, the nails were a death sentence. The crude surgery and the constant neurological trauma would kill a man in weeks or months. But Angron was a Primarch. His transhuman physiology endured the implantation, though the process was said to have been an ordeal of such agony that it scarred his soul as deeply as it did his mind. The nails sank their tendrils deep into his unique Primarch brain, intertwining with his very being. They could not be removed without killing him. From that moment forward, Angron's existence was defined by an unending headache, a constant, sharp, metallic torment that was his only companion in the quiet moments between battles. He was a demigod, trapped inside a torture device of his own body. Yet in the arena, the nails made him unstoppable. His rage was no longer just an emotion. It was a weaponized force of nature. He became a legend, the Red Angel of the Pits, a figure of both terror and hope to the downtrodden slaves of Nuceria. He did not just fight for his own survival. He began to see that his strength could be a shield for others. It was in the blood-soaked sands of the arena that Angron found the one thing that would ever matter to him: brotherhood. He was not alone in his suffering. He was surrounded by other gladiators, men and women, from 100 different conquered peoples, all bound by the same chains, all marked for the same violent death. Among them he forged a family. He defended the weak, he trained the willing, and he shared what little he had. The greatest of these was Onamaus, a gladiator of immense skill and wisdom, who became as a father to the young Primarch, teaching him not just how to fight, but how to lead. For the first time, Angron's rage found a purpose beyond mere survival. It was directed outwards, at the system that had enslaved them, at the high riders who watched them die for sport. He began to organize. He began to whisper of rebellion. His fame gave him influence, and his strength gave his words weight. He spoke of freedom, of a world where no one would wear chains. He united the disparate warring gladiator bands under a single banner. They called themselves the Eaters of Cities, a promise of the vengeance they would one day visit upon the high riders in their untouchable spires. They were his brothers and sisters, his true family, forged in the crucible of the arena. They were the only people he would ever truly love, the only army he would ever truly call his own. The rebellion, when it came, was an explosion of pent-up fury. Angron and his army of gladiators broke their chains, slaughtered their guards, and stormed out of the arenas of Desh'ea. They were hopelessly outmatched, an army of escaped slaves armed with little more than arena weapons and righteous fury, pitted against the technologically advanced, well-equipped armies of the Nucerian oligarchy. Yet they did the impossible. Led by Angron, whose strategic genius was as formidable as his personal prowess, they waged a brilliant guerrilla war against their former masters. They retreated into the northern mountains, the same desolate highlands where Angron had first been found. From these natural fortresses, they launched raids, liberated slave camps, and smashed Nucerian patrols. For years they fought and bled and died, but they were never defeated. They became a symbol of hope for every slave on Nuceria. Angron was their king, their savior, a figure of myth who had risen from the dirt to challenge the heavens. He shared every hardship with his soldiers. He ate what they ate, slept where they slept, and bled where they bled. He was one of them. He was their brother, their father, their hope. And as their struggle reached its final desperate climax, as the full military might of Nuceria's high riders gathered to crush them once and for all, Angron and his surviving warriors prepared to make their last stand on a mountain plateau. They knew they were going to die, but they would die free. It was here, on the eve of his final battle with his true family at his back, that the Emperor of mankind arrived. The ship that descended from the heavens was a vessel of gold and light, a thing of such transcendent majesty that it seemed to belong to a different reality. From it strode a figure of radiant power, the master of mankind, come at last to claim his lost son. The emperor saw the demigod at the head of a ragged army of rebels. He saw the crude cybernetics hammered into his son's skull. He analyzed their function, understood their horrific purpose, and recognized them as a debased form of technology from the Dark Age. He saw a flawed, damaged asset, a priceless weapon that had been brutalized and broken by primitives. He offered Angron his birthright, command of a legion of superhuman warriors, a fleet of starships, a place in the grand destiny of humanity. He offered him the galaxy. Angron refused. He looked at the Golden King before him and saw just another High Rider, another master come to claim him. His place was here, his family was here. His loyalty was to the men and women who had bled with him, who were about to die with him. He would not abandon them. He chose to die with his brothers and sisters on that mountain. It was a choice of love, of loyalty, of honor. It was perhaps the most noble, the most human choice any Primarch ever made. And the Emperor, in his infinite wisdom and his cold, inhuman calculus, could not accept it. He did not see a son making a stand for his family. He saw a strategic asset refusing to be recovered. He saw a tool choosing to be broken along with lesser, disposable things. The Emperor had come for a Primarch, and he would not leave without one. He had no interest in Angron's slave army. They were mortals, ephemeral, irrelevant to the grand sweep of galactic history. They were the collateral damage of his son's unfortunate upbringing. And so, as the armies of Nuceria advanced up the mountain slopes for the final slaughter, the Emperor committed the act of betrayal that would define Angron's existence forever. He did not intervene to save the rebels. He did not smite the Nucerian slavers. He reached out with his immense psychic power and, against Angron's will, teleported his son away from the battlefield and up to the bridge of his flagship in orbit. Angron was forced to watch, helpless and screaming in fury and grief, on the main view screen of the victorious Spirit as his family, his brothers and sisters, the only people he had ever loved, were annihilated. He watched as the army of the High Riders swarmed the plateau and systematically butchered every last one of his warriors. He watched his rebellion die. He watched his hope be extinguished. He was saved, but his soul was murdered. The Emperor had preserved the body of his Primarch, but he had shattered the man within. In that moment, Angron's nascent nobility, his capacity for love and loyalty, was cauterized by a grief so profound it bordered on madness. All that was left was the pain of the nails, and the burning, bottomless well of his hatred for the father who had saved his life by taking his reason for living. He was brought to his legion, the 12th, who had been known as the Warhounds. They were a force of savage, relentless shock troops, known for their ferocity and their unshakable brotherhood. They had waited for their Primarch with a devotion bordering on religious fervor. They received a broken, sullen, hate-filled stranger who wanted nothing to do with them. He refused to speak to them, refused to lead them. He killed the first captain of the Legion who tried to connect with him, a man who dared to call him brother. To Angron, the word brother was a sacred memory, a name for the dead on a world he could never return to. These perfect, shining soldiers were not his family. They were his jailers, symbols of the father he despised. In his grief and rage, he ordered the Legion to rename itself. They would no longer be the Warhounds. They would be the World Eaters. in honor of his first army, the Eaters of Cities. It was a name that carried the weight of his loss, a constant reminder of his true, lost family. The veteran legionaries, men like the respected dreadnought Lork, saw the damage in their Primarch. The unending agony etched on his face. They saw a leader who did not want to lead, a father who refused his sons. Yet their loyalty was absolute. They yearned for his acceptance, for a way to bridge the chasm of his grief. And in their desperation to understand their sire, to share his burden, they made a fatal choice. Surgeons and tech marines of the World Eaters, working from crude scans of Angron's own implants, began to replicate the butcher's nails. They sought to implant their own rank-and-file legionaries with the same technology, believing that by sharing his pain, they could finally earn his respect and understand his rage. It was an act of profound, misguided loyalty. The initial attempts were catastrophic, killing most of the subjects. But they persevered, refining the crude Nucerian technology until it could be implanted into the transhuman physiology of a space marine. And so, the Legion began to die, one by one, squad by squad, company by company. The World Eaters submitted themselves to the nails, and one by one they were transformed. The controlled aggression of the warhounds was replaced by the berserk, indiscriminate fury of the World Eaters. Their tactical discipline eroded, replaced by a simple, brutal charge into the meat grinder of close combat. They became incapable of strategy, of subtlety, of anything other than overwhelming, headlong assault. The nails corroded their minds, erasing their memories, their personalities, their very humanity, leaving only the screaming desire for bloodshed. They were no longer the Emperor's proud soldiers. They were becoming a legion of berserkers, addicted to violence, slaves to the implanted torment in their own skulls. Angron, for his part, did not stop them. Some say he encouraged it, seeing in their self-mutilation a faint echo of the sacrifice his true family had made. Others believe he was simply too lost in his own pain to care. He began to lead them in battle, and under his command, the World Eaters became an instrument of unparalleled destruction. They shattered armies, broke fortress walls, and drowned worlds in blood. They were brutally effective, but they were a blunt, horrific instrument. They left no cities standing, took no prisoners, and offered no quarter. Their compliance actions were less battles and more exterminations. Whispers began to spread throughout the Imperium, stories of the 12th Legion's savagery, of their blood-soaked rampages. His brother Primarchs, men like Leman Russ and Mortarion, were warriors of grim reputation, but even they were disturbed by the sheer mindless butchery of the World Eaters. They saw a legion that had lost its soul, led by a Primarch who seemed to be in a constant state of agony-fueled rage. The Emperor knew. He knew what was happening to the 12th Legion. He knew that the nails were destroying his son, and that his son was in turn destroying his own legion. Yet he did nothing. Angron and the World Eaters were too effective a weapon to discard. They were the force you unleashed when you needed a world broken beyond repair, an enemy annihilated to the last soul. And so the Emperor pointed his broken son at the horrors of the galaxy and let his pain serve the cause of empire. He treated Angron not as a son to be healed, but as a weapon to be used until it shattered. He set his legion on a path of endless war, feeding the nails with a constant stream of violence, hoping, perhaps, that the fires of the crusade would cauterize the wound he himself had inflicted. But the wound only festered. Inside Angron, the nails were not just causing pain, they were killing him. The archaeotech was degrading his advanced Primarch brain, slowly eating away at the very neurology that made him a demigod. His moments of lucidity grew fewer and farther between. His headaches became blinding, crippling seizures. His rage became less a tool and more his entire state of being. He was dying, a slow, agonizing death of the mind, and he knew it. And he blamed one person, his father, the emperor, who had the power to save him on Nuceria, who could have saved his family, but chose instead to abduct him and turn him into this thing, this screaming, dying beast in ceramite armor. It is for this reason that when the call to rebellion came, Angron did not hesitate. When his brother Horus Lupercal, the favored son, the war master of the Great Crusade, offered him a chance to tear down the emperor's imperium, Angron accepted without a second thought. For him, this was not about ambition or power or ideology. It was not about correcting the perceived flaws in the emperor's vision. It was about vengeance. It was a chance to finally inflict a fraction of the pain he had endured upon the father who had betrayed him. He did not care about Horus's plans or the promises of the Chaos Gods. He cared only for the prospect of standing on the rubble of the imperial palace on Terra, of looking his father in the eye as his false empire burned. The Horus heresy was not a fall for Angron. It was a homecoming. He was finally unleashed, his leash cut, his rage given its ultimate sanctioned target. On the black sands of Istvan V, the World Eaters were unleashed upon their former brothers in the Raven Guard, the Iron Hands, and the Salamanders. It was not a battle. It was a festival of slaughter. Here Karn, his equerry and the most favored of his new sons, fully embraced the bloodshed, becoming the avatar of the Legion's new, dark purpose. The World Eaters, their armor stained red with the blood of their cousins, cemented their damnation. They had not been seduced by chaos. They had simply found a banner under which their pre-existing state of being was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. The ruinous powers had watched Angron for a long time. They saw a being of immense power already consecrated to the path of violence and rage. Khorne, the blood god, the Lord of Skulls, saw in the tormented Primarch the perfect champion. He was not a convert to be won over. He was the living embodiment of everything Khorne represented: rage, martial prowess, and an unending hunger for slaughter. Throughout the heresy, as the World Eaters carved a bloody path across the galaxy towards Terra, Angron's physical and mental state continued to decay. The nails were reaching their final, terminal stage. His brother Lorgar, the Urizen, the first of the Primarchs to fall to the worship of chaos, saw that his brother was about to die, his magnificent Primarch brain finally succumbing to the technological infection. Lorgar could not allow such a potent weapon to be lost. In a grand, dark ritual on the world of Deluge, he orchestrated Angron's ascension. He did not ask for Angron's consent. Just as the Emperor had stolen Angron from his family, Lorgar now stole him from mortality. The ritual channeled the full, undiluted power of the warp into the dying Primarch. It was an apotheosis of agony. The nails were not removed. They were fused with his very essence, their technological function replaced by the raw, metaphysical power of rage. His body was broken and remade, twisted into a monstrous form. He became a creature of brass and blood and incandescent fury, a being no longer bound by the laws of reality. He became a Daemon Prince of Khorne. The transformation was the ultimate act of slavery. Angron, who had fought his entire life for freedom, was now bound for eternity to the whims of a dark god. His consciousness, what little remained of it, was subsumed almost entirely by the endless roaring hunger of the blood god. The gladiator king, the rebel leader, the broken son, all of it was burned away, leaving only the Red Angel, a mindless engine of destruction, a wound in the fabric of the galaxy that would never heal. He had traded the slow death of the nails for an eternity of servitude to the rage they had cultivated. And so it has been, across all the long centuries of the Imperium's slow decay. The tale of Angron is a lesson in the cruelty of pragmatism. The Emperor saw a weapon, and in his desire to preserve it, he destroyed the sun. He chose the path of cold logic, and in doing so, created a monster fueled by a righteous grievance. Angron's rage was never his own. It was forged in the pits of Nuceria, hammered into his brain by his slave masters, and then honed and aimed by the father who refused to heal him. He is the ultimate proof that the Imperium was built not just on a foundation of hope, but on a bedrock of sacrifice, betrayal, and broken promises. He is the Emperor's greatest failure, a living testament to the moment when the master of mankind chose a general over a son, and in doing so, damned them both. Now, as darkness closes on the 41st millennium, the echoes of that failure still resound. The World Eaters, now a shattered legion of Khorne berserkers, still plague the galaxy, their only purpose to shed blood for the blood god, and sometimes, from the depths of the warp, their master returns. Angron, the demon primarch, the Red Angel, emerges to lead them. He is a force of pure elemental destruction, a being of such concentrated rage that reality itself recoils from his presence. There is no reason left in him, no memory of the brothers on the mountain, no trace of the man who chose to die for love. There is only the scream. The same scream that echoed in the arenas of Nuceria, the same scream of a demigod in chains. The chains are metaphysical now. His master a god of slaughter, but he is no more free than he was as a slave. He is the ghost of the Great Crusade's greatest sin, a perpetual engine of wrath, forever fighting a war that he lost 10,000 years ago, on a lonely mountain at the moment of his salvation.